Welcome back to The Common Historian, where history meets the supernatural. I'm Jeremy, and each week we explore the haunting intersections between our past and the paranormal. Tonight, I'm joined by two incredible guests who teamed up to hunt one of America's most terrifying cryptids. D.A. Wysong is an international paranormal fiction author and creator of the Monster Hunters of America series, including her book on the Goat Man. And Ronald Murphy Jr. is a folklorist and cryptid researcher with over 30 years of experience investigating the stuff of nightmares. He wrote the foreword for DA's Goatman book. Together, we're going to dive in to the legend of the Goatman. So grab your favorite beverage, dim the lights, and prepare to journey into the world where history refuses to stay buried. Welcome, DA and Ron.
It's a
Thank
pleasure
you
to be
for
here,
having
sir.
us. Thank you, Jeremy.
I'm excited for this discussion tonight.
BA is one of my favorite people, but this is the first time we've ever shared a forum together. So we have you to thank for that.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's exciting.
And Ron's one of my favorites, and I actually go to him for a lot of my when I am writing because he is like a walking encyclopedia. He's actually known, he's got a nickname, the Cryptid Guru. They don't call him that for nothing.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. But the interesting thing about your show is that you really do look at the stuff of the paranormal and the unexplained from historical settings and from other places rather than just the woo. And the woo is good, don't get me wrong. But as a historian and as a folklorist, it's very important to put what we deal with into some sort of historical context, because without the context, we really don't understand the mysteries completely. And I think the Goatman is definitely one of these types of cryptids.
Absolutely.
Yes. So to get started, I have a question for both of you. For the listeners that might not be familiar, can you guys paint a picture of what the Goatman actually is?
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to hear from DA's point of view first, because she looks at it from a creative point of view. As an author, what does the Goatman mean to you?
Well, when I look at the Goatman and when I started deciding to write this book, I actually look at the Goatman as something very primitive that kind of lays in our subconscious mind as, uninhibited and part animal and part goat, part human and part animal, the animalistic nature of the Goatman, letting go of all the inhibitions. And it just so happens he's always found in the woods somewhere, doing all the things that are taboo to current society, I think. And I have a whole different approach to all cryptids. And the further I go into my research, I find it fascinating that there's an evolution of each cryptid or each monster, which I think has to do with us as a human being and our nature of making that evolve, during to each culture.
I think that's extremely important. Yeah, extremely important. And to piggyback off that a little bit more, is that when you look at the goat, obviously now we have the Christian aspect of where you see something satanic in it. But in ancient cultures, in pagan cultures, the goats often represented, as you said a little bit earlier, lasciviousness, this kind of wanton ambition. So it's often portrayed as hypersexual. What's interesting about the goat man is it becomes a creature that haunts lovers' lanes. It is where people go to park. It's where teenagers go to get their first kiss and all that kind of stuff. It resides in the liminal area, not only between civilization and nature, but also between innocent and experience as well. Oftentimes they're seen in and around bridges as if they belong to a particular geographical area, almost like Billy Goat's Gruff, and it's the little troll that lives under the bridge. The Goatman also has this type of persona that it protects the liminal area, that place where you have to physically cross over from one place into another. So I think when we look at the Goatman from that particular view, not only is it some sort of monstrous creature that often people see as demonic, it also represents human nature left to run wild. It's us, truly, if we're going to look into that mirror and see the reflection of the goat man, in that reflection, we see the human being left unfettered and without any kind of.
It's almost like a metamorphosis from the innocent into that experience
That's
where
right.
that bridge is.
Yeah, absolutely true. I think that is why this creature fascinates us, because it is a rite of passage for so many people. The goat man lives down there. So we get together as a group of teenagers and we go down there and find out what's going on, which is the reason why I love your book so much there, DA. So imagine, if you will, having that kind of teenage, that early adulthood kind of experience whenever your friends get together and we dare each other to go into the shadows and find out what might lurk there. So in DA's book, we get to travel with a group of friends that are so inclined to do such things, and we live vicariously through them. Now, of course, there's a lot of creativity in your books as well, too. It's not just a litany of sightings. It's actually based upon, different types of folklores and different type of historic points of view are brought in to conceptualize what you see the goat man to be. But at the end of the day, it's a great romp into that world of adolescence burgeoning on adulthood. And that, once there, we can never go back.
Exactly. That's a really good point, Ron. But even like going beyond where our history is historically and as a nation, as you go back into Rome and you go back into Greek mythology, where you have the satyr and the faun, it's almost like a primitive imprint on our subconscious as as nature, for our nature.
Sure.
You touched on exactly what I was
like
going to
I
ask
said,
next.
it's the primitive part.
I was going to kind of talk about the origins of the goat man was the next kind of thing I was going to go into. It's kind of nice that you kind of let in with that. So,
and that's what I think is so fascinating, because we have just like the whole world has, with each thing, just like Goatman, nobody had internet. We didn't have cell phones, but yet in that subconscious level, it's there. And it just goes along with each culture, which it's basically the same thing. There's a little bit of a different name. There's a little bit of a different characteristic, but when you go down to the basis of it, it's very much the same being or the same concept.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's definitely a creature that's anthropomorphized as a human being, right? So there's a personification of that natural sexual urge and unbridled lust. And you have a figure that is like a human being. And whenever we approach that uncanny valley of the mind, what we get is, whenever we are presented with such a creature, is we are reviled by it because it looks so similar to us, yet it has a tendency to act in ways that we normally don't act because of laws or taboos. But it does allow us to consider, if for a moment, the way we live and the way we lead our life and the way it does as well, too. It's a juxtaposition between two very different worlds. One world of us who are civilized and we're supposed to live by reason and we're supposed to control our passions. And the other one about this humanoid who looks like a human being that walks on two legs, looks remarkably like us, except it has the attributes of a goat. It's that mishmash of different ideologies that shocks us and also invites us even further down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, and don't you find it interesting, Ron, how the Krampus, when I started writing the book, I went to Maine, and I did tie all that into that. But the Krampus is very much a goat man, and it's actually the shadow sign of Santa Claus or Father Christmas. And just like what you said with the taboo, it's just, it manifested into this goat man.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I think once we have things manifested, once we have things in our sights that looks like a human being, then maybe we can negotiate with it better as the human race, right? Maybe we can communicate with it, maybe we can reason with it, or at least come to terms with it. And I think that's a reason why we naturally take things that are chaotic and obscure and make them into our images because we can better understand it.
That ties into, I was really, and I still am fascinated with Baphomet. I mean, that is definitely animalistic and human in nature. And, I think we talked about this before. The Baphomet was brought up in the 13th century during the Knights Templar. The King of France, they, had a squabble with the Knights Templar. And, I mean, everybody has their own take, but on a historical approach, when I started researching that, I think it was basically just to get rid of the Knights Templar. And so they just came up with this deity because really there was no reference to a Baphomet, and then they had them worshiping this Baphomet. You know what I mean? But really, there was no image of the Baphomet. It was discussed and it was said to be a deity, but nobody, yet there's no trace in a historical view until the 18th century when an occultist, the French occultist of that, drew the first Baphomet. That's only a little over 100 and something years ago of where the imagination came in, and then that primitive thing with the goat and the animal. And then the next thing you know, you got this deity that these Knights Templar. Yeah.
That's absolutely true. Now, oftentimes in the Middle Ages, you will find illuminated manuscripts representing the devil as a goat figure. Again, and also because it's situated around females as well, too. Oftentimes you'll see a goat sitting around a group of women. It's because it is your passions left to run wild, right? And people believe that women without men were the most wanton creatures around. So they were very goat-like, right? So you see that there, but yeah, absolutely what you're talking about. Until you have this deification, you are going for, thousands of years, going back even before Pan and before the Seder, you're going back thousands of years to the very dawn of creation, whenever you have this notion that there is something like us out there that is able to live without any kind of taboos or laws, that lives unfettered in the world around us.
Our animalistic nature.
That's right. Yes, because we've always been animalistic, right? That's one of the reasons why we have to have laws, is because it keeps us in check, because without them, we wouldn't be running roughshod, right? A lot of times you hear people called certain things, like guys can be called pigs and women are called chicks and all this other kind of animal metaphor in there.
That's true.
Yeah. So whenever you get to the goat, you're capable of being quite dangerous as well. Goats, for the most part, are not these very tame animals. They can be quite vicious at times.
Oh, tell me about it. My daughter just had to hang up on the phone earlier because she was fighting with one of her goats on the farm.
There you go. And
I don't think it's fucking her with the horns, and she was freaking out a little bit.
And then whenever you look at the symbolism that's found in the book of Revelation, oftentimes Satan is represented as this goat figure as well. And the reason is, if you look at the Judeo-Christian aspect of things, lambs were something that was seen by God to be set aside for sacrifice, while goats, not so much. In the gospel, Jesus said he's going to separate groups of people into the sheep or into the rams. And the rams never have it easy, right? It's always the goats that come out with the short end of the stick, simply because they do not operate in the same realm of normal farm animals, right? They're a little bit different than all these kind of creatures.
I agree.
Yeah.
Good point.
I wanted to ask you guys, I know you guys collaborated on Ye's book, The Goat Man. You did the foreword for that. How did that collaboration come about? And what made you both want to tackle this particular cryptid?
Well, I came across her profile on Tinder, and I thought that she was pretty hot. And I said, hey, is there anything that we can do, And she said, hey, you want to write this forward for me? Now, it wasn't like that, but it was similar. We go in the same circles. I think anybody in the field of cryptozoology and the supernatural kind of, the 6 degree of separation, everybody's kind of interconnected somehow. She was writing things that I had genuine interest in. I'm very careful about who I write forwards for because it's putting your name out there. And I was just completely taken by this group of kids that she invented. And it was like one of those things that I always wanted to do whenever I was that age. So, as I said at the very outside of the show, I get to vicariously travel along with these guys and solve mysteries that I wished I was doing whenever I was their age.
I appreciate that, Ron. I actually approached Ron because he's actually one of my favorites when I do get around to watching a podcast, and he has just got a plethora of information, and he's really easy to talk to, and I could go to him and ask him, different things, and he always had a good answer. And I knew that he had some information with the Goat Man. I'd seen him on, I think it was Dave Scott's show. I think you were talking about that. So I was tickled when he said he would write the foreword. He has written a couple forewords for me. The other one, the last one was Thunderbirds. Every time I turn the TV on, there's Ron Murphy. And you know what I love about Ron is he's actually not just a researcher and a folklorist and an author, but he has actually had experiences with some of the different in the area that he lives in Pennsylvania. Makes me want to go hunting for God knows what's in your backyard. Is there a Bigfoot back there, you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that is the thing, right? People talk about being boots on the ground and such. Ever since I've been a kid, I've been fascinated by these things. And I've been out in the woods actively looking for creatures, and that's what keeps us going. We keep going out there and hope that we're going to uncover this mystery that we've been infatuated with for most of our lives. So that's what keeps me going. I'm just naturally enamored by these things, and I think, and you had said it earlier, that these things are definitely part of our humanity, right? They're embroidered into our DNA, and it makes us more human, if that makes any sense. Without these monsters, okay, talking about ghosts, without these monsters, we don't have any scapegoats, right? For the most part, we human beings are the most monstrous creatures on this planet. By projecting what we do onto monsters, they become our scapegoats. They take our blame away from us because we don't want to admit what we're capable of doing.
Yeah, that's my saying. Actually, I write about monsters and sometimes they're human.
That's right.
And actually, with the Monster Hunters of America, the first two books are very human. It starts in Nazi war during the World War II, and that was some of the most monstrous times as a humanity as it goes, with the Holocaust. So, and just on a side note, I am going to add my last book with the state of Pennsylvania with a character added as Ron Murphy meeting the Monster Hunters.
I see. I finally get a chance to hang out with these guys. I am absolutely flattered. I cannot wait.
I can't wait to write it. It'll probably be in the spring, and we will be having a lot of meetings because I just can't wait to do it. It's going to be in Chestnut Ridge, which is where you live, basically, isn't it?
So what are they going to be investigating? Nice. I cannot wait. This will be great.
Yeah, tell him about the squonk because that was a new cryptid to me until we talked about that. I never even heard of it before.
Right. Yeah, so the squonk hasn't been out there for a great deal of time. The first time it's really written about, actually the first time it's at any time it's written about is around 1911. The rest of the time it was just, strange oral tradition. And it's one of these little creatures that is, for the most part in cryptozoology, there's things that are very frightening in nature, these creatures. But the squonk is not, it doesn't have, fangs. It doesn't have claws. It's just this little pig-like creature that is said to be so ugly that it hides away from any kind of reflection. It doesn't go out in the rain or anything because it has a fear that it will see itself in a puddle. So it's very lonely. It lives in the woods and only goes out at night. If you do happen to capture the squonk, it will dissolve away in a pool of tears. Now, that being said, it does raise its head a few times in modern culture. The group Steely Dan has a song that mentions the squonk, and the rock group Genesis also has a song entitled The Squonk, which is all about this weird little cryptid. So yeah, it's become one of my favorites because it means so much. At face value, it's just a strange, forlorn little Eeyore type of creature that you would expect to see in Winnie the Pooh. But on a much grander scale, it's seen as a premonition of what will happen to the environment if we decide to continue destroying every natural resource that we have.
Oh, wow. That's deep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've never heard of that.
Listening to that description, I kept feeling, my impression was that it has to be somehow tied into the elemental kingdom.
Oh, absolutely. So, yeah. So as we can talk about that for a bit, elementals are something that I'm really fascinated in and something that I research, ad nauseum.
My favorite.
Yeah, because
My ultimate favorite.
Yeah, because what happens is elementals symbolize the intelligences within the world around us. They represent the intelligence within the earth itself and in fire and air and in water. The squonk is kind of like that as well, too. It straddles that world between the physical and the miraculous. And if it goes too far over on one side, then it becomes something totally different. For instance, if it goes too far over into fear, it becomes nothing but water. It resolves itself and becomes nothing more. But if it goes too far over to the other side, then it becomes an omen for what we could become. Because I think when we look in the mirror, we see the squonk because this is what happens if the ozone layer is depleted, right? This is what happens if we deforest everything and strip the ocean of all its natural resources. Then we become something that's desperately ugly. And at the end of the day, we have no place to hide.
I love that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm excited to write that book.
Yes, I am too. I'm excited to read about it. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. And and Ron actually just released his book on the squonk.
I did
Oh,
a couple.
did you?
It's on my list to read.
You'll have to give me a link to that and I'll put it in the description.
Absolutely, I would do that.
I'm still reading that book. It's a really good book.
Well, I appreciate that. If anybody here is in Western Pennsylvania, I will be presenting at Indiana University of Pennsylvania as part of a speaker series, the environmental interconnection between the squonk and other cryptids. I'm very excited. Again, that's going to be October 24th at Indiana University of Pennsylvania. I'm excited because universities now are slowly opening up their doors and allowing people like myself to come in and talk at an academic level in an educational forum about things that are normally marginalized as something in the world of the superstitious. But I think it's very important because what we do when we talk about these creatures, these cryptids, is that we start looking closer at the human being that believes in such things and that has created such things. To me, whenever you look at cryptids, it is as much an investigation into the sociological as it is the biological.
Yeah,
it
does seem like the academic community is more open to speaking on or listening more to talks about the cryptids and supernatural, etc.
Paranormal.
Right.
Yeah, and they actually
go
ahead.
I was going to say, even if they don't exist, then let's just say Bigfoot or all this stuff, none of this stuff exists. Well, if it doesn't physically exist, then why do we have so many legends about it? So that's worthy of studying in and of itself, because there's these creatures out there that symbolize something to every culture around the world to the point that they've become archetypes. That is worth studying, like I said, in and of itself.
I agree 100%. And that's really well put. Yeah.
Probably moving on more into the goat man, if we can dive into the most famous version, the Maryland goat man of Prince George County. Ron, could you explain the legend from the early 70s a little bit?
You know what? So I do not know this, unfortunately, verbatim. Okay, yeah, unfortunately, I don't. I have been to the Lake Worth area where that goat man was supposed to exist. So as far as a folklorist goes, I know that the one that we're talking about has the same kind of it's of the same essence of all these other goat men, but I cannot talk, unfortunately, directly with this with things.
Okay, that's perfectly fine. One of the things with this one, from what I've heard when I researched, was that the most popular origin story involves a scientist at the
Yeah.
Beltsville Agricultural Research Center whose goats experiments went horribly wrong. And from what I could tell, the USDA actually had to deny this. So I wonder what this tells us about the anxieties around science and the unknown.
Well,
So I
yeah, I
gather
would,
you've rung a couple bells.
yeah.
Go ahead, DA.
No, when I think
Go.
that was in the 70s, I knew briefly about that story. And when I did hear about that, I really didn't go that way in my book just because I had it in Maine and I wanted to keep it in Maine. But the first impression I get when I hear that is that that's exactly what they did on Plum Island, when the Nazi war ended. They experimented with animals and humans. And so that would not be too far fetched for me. I do believe
That's
that's probably really what they did. And they're doing it now,
right.
without a doubt in my mind.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought this particular case up because, like I said, I had forgotten the details. But yeah, now whenever we get back to the idea of engineering going on and people treading in areas where we should not go, it immediately brings to mind H.G. Wells' The Island of Dr. Moreau, where
Yeah,
somebody has the idea that they can play God and in so doing create abominations. And I think that's what's going on, this initial goat man, because sometimes the person that has been morphed into this goat human creature is seen carrying around an axe as if he's angry with humanity around him, or he wants to say stay. He doesn't want to be seen. But there's always this air of mystery about it. So it's almost like the idea of Jurassic Park. Just because we can do something doesn't mean that we should do something. And then we look at the ramifications of whenever we decide to go into places and play God.
Yeah, and
exactly.
didn't they bring back one of the prehistoric wolves or something like that? Dire
The
wolf, yes. I couldn't remember the name. And I've heard rumors of the woolly mammoth and the saber-toothed tiger. I don't see the need to bring the saber-toothed tiger back personally, but
Right. Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that because, probably the woolly mammoth died out because of human involvement. That's probably the case. So it may still have been around for a while if we didn't play a part in it. So possibly, that may make sense. And we know that there were still woolly mammoths around up until the time the pyramids were being built. So we know that these are not ancient creatures. You can go back 5,000 years, and if you hunted hard enough, you would be able to find yourself a woolly mammoth. I'm all for the idea of bringing something like that back. You're right. Whenever we bring about apex predators, the only chance they would ever have was to be live in a zoo. And that's not a quality of life for anything that's alive, whether it's manufactured or not. So, I would love to see it. And people have talked about this before too, that if we would be able to have the technology to bring back the woolly mammoth, could you then reintroduce them into places like Siberia or into the tundra areas? That's quite possible. And as I've said, I truly feel that if we did not have a hand in it, they still might be alive to this day.
yeah, I agree. I really think we were probably the main reason that they're no longer here.
Amen, brother. Amen.
Are you familiar with the Pope Lick monster in
Uh,
northern
not
Kentucky?
not really. It's not in northern Kentucky. I mean, I think it's
Oh,
down further.
southern Kentucky.
Yeah, I'm not
Mm,
really that familiar with it. No, I'm not.
okay.
That was one
Um,
cryptid I just really never. When I was doing the goat man, I just took it to a whole completely different level.
different way.
Yeah, I went with Baphomet and Krampus and the Wild Hunt and the goat man that was the sightings there in Maine, basically, and the
Okay.
origins of where it kind of came from.
So, Ron, you've written about Bigfoot, the Dogman, vampires, and more. How does the Goat Man compare to the other cryptids?
Oh, you know what? That is actually a great question. I think in many ways it follows the same kind of guidelines as Bigfoot in places of Appalachia. There's often sightings of something called the goat squatch. something along those lines. It's basically a goat man, but people see it more as a Bigfoot with horns. That's just the way they're retelling the story again and again. But I think it exists in that same type of milieu, right? It exists in that liminal zone between the animalistic and the human. And it is, it's both a morality tale and a warning what would happen if we allow ourselves to descend into too much chaos.
True. Yes. I have a question for both of you. In your research and investigations, what's the most compelling goat man evidence that you guys have encountered?
I would have to say it's witness testimony, right? I've never seen a Bigfoot. I've never seen a Dogman or anything like that. But whenever somebody comes up and starts talking to you in a very lucid and sober manner about something that they had seen that looks like a goat creature, then you have to take them at their word. I've had many people talk about such things to the point that I know there's something going on out there, whether it's some sort of a chimera between a human and a goat, or some sort of agricultural experiment gone awry. Whatever the fact is, there is something out there that people are seeing that allows them to quantify it as a goat man.
I agree with Ron on that. I don't have really anything other than that, but it is witness testimony. It's huge for all of it.
Yeah.
And doesn't it seem like like in the last even 5 years, it has accelerated like crazy.
It
Which,
has.
that takes you into the woo, right? I mean,
That's right.
I think they can go in between dimensions or different worlds or whatever, but I definitely think the increase of sightings on all cryptids has really amped up. There's a
Yep.
reason for that.
Right. Well, there's a few reasons for that. One of the reasons is it's becoming much more culturally acceptable to talk about these things. Look at the show that we're doing right now, my dear, and also look at things that are on television and on YouTube. We now have a forum in which to talk about the unexplained, and it's not on some sort of show that's 1 o'clock in the morning on some sort of obscure AM station,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, people
Yeah.
are talking about this all the time right now. And I'm glad that they are. I'm glad that we have an open dialogue. And I'm glad there's people out there debate us. And I'm glad there's people out there that say that we're full of crap, because if they say such a thing, then obviously they have an alternative. And I'm willing to listen to alternatives. Right now, I keep my mind very open. And I do not know what to tell somebody whenever they tell me that they've had an experience with a goat like creature. I'm not sure what to do with that besides listening, documenting it, and taking it at face value.
Just like during the Salem witch trials, I mean, witnesses would say they literally would see that type of creature there dancing around with the witches.
That's right. And
That
if
is
you ever
true.
watch the movie The Witch, which is one of these folklore horror movies that people are talking about nowadays, it's very odd, to watch it. But there is a character called Black Phillip in there, which is this, this goat creature that really does represent all the things that are evil within the world.
Of course, I have my own take on things, like when we see 10 different versions of Bigfoot or different versions of, the squonk or whatever cryptid dogman. There's literally so many different versions. It's just like if somebody were to see a crime being committed, everybody would have a little bit of a different thing. I do believe sometimes we could be dealing with physical creatures that we, in the woods. They could be spiritual, just like we are spiritual and physical. It could be both that too. But it could also be a manifestation on a collective consciousness as an egregore, just like with the witches' Sabbath, where that is created by drumming it up and it manifests into the collective consciousness. I've been on that kick a lot lately. The Buddhist monks deal with the tulpas. The egregores are on a collective consciousness, where everybody's, I think that happened even in Bobby Mackey's. There were certain ghosts that really weren't a ghost. It was an egregore because they repeated that story so many times and they believed that it literally manifested. It was no historical evidence of that type of ghost being in that particular honky tonk. And I think it could be the same as in the woods.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. A little bit of woo to it, but that's okay because we human beings have a little bit of woo in us. And like you said, there's the Eastern philosophy as the tulpa, and the egregore makes perfect sense to me. That if enough people put enough thought into it, this thought form can take on a life of its own. I'm completely agreeing with that.
Absolutely. I think you know what I think so really cool is that as a humanity, we are growing and seeing what we're capable of. I mean, if we can manifest something like that, whether it's physical, there could be, it's not just one thing. There is definitely physical creatures such as that. But I also think they could be a thought form on a collective consciousness that we would call an egregore.
Well,
So
I
we're
love it.
just realizing how powerful we are as people.
Things come down to vibration and frequency, doesn't it? And if you keep on putting that out there, these vibrations, and we talked about elementals a little bit earlier, these vibrations tend to take shape.
That takes us down a whole new road, like with Bigfoot and the elemental connection, which is one of my other books. I believe there is a definite connection there.
When we look at things deeper, put them under that microscope, we see that there's an elemental aspect to everything that we call paranormal, whether it's ghosts or fairies. There's definitely that earth connection that few people don't discuss. And I think it's necessary that we do.
I agree.
How has the internet age kind of changed the legends compared to campfire tales or newspapers of 30, 40 years ago?
I personally think it's just what we were discussing, and Slender Man is a perfect example. That was a tulpa. That was a fictional creature. And these girls, these teenage girls, believed in that creature so much that they did something monstrous, took it back to where humans can be the monsters. It started out as a drawing. I think the internet, people go off half cocked and hear something and they just add to it. It's like the telephone line, the old game where you sat around in a circle and you whispered something in somebody's ear. It's just magnified with the internet. You have to
Yeah.
really dig deep when you're researching. You can't go on the internet. You have to go deeper into the folklore, like what Ron does and what I do myself, and go into archives and really cross reference things. You can't just go off like that if you want to keep it
Right.
historically accurate.
The thing is, in our generation, if you read something in a book or saw something on the television, you assumed that it was factual, right? Because it was checked and double checked, but not so now on the internet because we don't know where this stuff is coming from. And then with the proliferation of AI and special effects and all this stuff, we can see something and we don't know whether to believe it or not because artificial intelligence is so close to creating something that looks so lifelike. So, gone are the days of the blob squats, and gone are the days is whenever you take a picture of the woods and you have to circle something that you see in there. Because now what you're going to do is going to be able to produce a whole video of something monstrous chasing you through the woods, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it's alive. We also can look at not only things like the goat man or the sheep squatch or all these other kind of new kids on the block. We also can see how the development of the mythology of the chupacabra developed as well too. It started out whenever I was younger of this like porcupine looking creature with these spikes all over its bodies and then, this long reptile like tongue and
Right.
these rolling eyes. Now, as you can see, as it left, Hispaniola, as it left that area and moved up into like Miami and then over into Texas, definitely following a migratory route of Hispanic folks during migrations, we can see that they take the story with them, and every culture in which it enters morphs into something else. Like you said, the game of telephone. So it's went from the islands of the Caribbean into something that was a devil porcupine into something now that has become a blue dog creature. We can see that happening over the period of just a couple decades.
Exactly.
Um,
I've got that as a subject on one of my upcoming books too, the chupacabra, which I find fascinating.
yeah, have there been reports of the Goatman sightings in 2025 that you have heard of, either of you? Or is it more
No.
something
Yeah.
previous?
Well, I think that no, I think that they're still going on, but it's so regional. Where I live right now, we have reports of Bigfoot probably a few times a week, right? But if I live in these other areas, I'm sure that the colloquial legends and folklore, I'm sure there's always going to be whispers around a high school cafeteria table of, did you hear that? Hey, I was out parking and this happened. So I think that you're going to get that more pronouncedly in the area in which you reside.
True, and
Yeah,
that
so there's definitely
makes
different
sense.
regions. Yeah, there's definitely different regions with, like in Kentucky, there is Bigfoot, but we get a lot of sightings with Dogman, and even in Ohio, you know. So I do think that is true.
For here where I am, I'm in the Adirondacks of New York. So Bigfoot and UFOs are what we usually hear.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And seeing a goat man there would be sort of out of place. I'm sure it's not out of the realm of possibility. But that's the other thing that fascinates me about DA's books. She takes this team of researchers and follows them around to different areas. We wouldn't know about the goat man unless people were reporting it and talking about it. Or, I'm in Western Pennsylvania right now. We wouldn't be talking about that because we don't have that legend around here. But so the internet also, getting back to that question that you had about that, the internet allows for a dissemination of information like never before in the history of mankind, but it doesn't necessarily mean that information is factually cross-checked. It's just information that people are putting out there. So, oral tradition, bits and pieces of folklore, things that are kind of patchwork put together becomes something of a regional legend and a regional monster and a geographical figure, which I find to be utterly fascinating from a folklore point of view, is because it shows what the needs are of the people in which this particular legend exists.
Yeah.
And like when I went with Maine for my book, Hunting for Goatman, there was quite a bit of sightings in Maine in the woods, and there was a lot of satanic rituals. And that's why I went with that state with the witches and the goat man showing up. Could it have been a manifestation of ritualistic, like a summoning through in what we would call a portal, would they manifest? So, when they're here, they're physical. So that's why I chose that particular area. I was trying to do something different than the normal. That particular area is really well known for goatman sightings.
And I mentioned Ron's recent book. Do you have one coming out or a new one out soon, DA?
Yes, I'm actually hunting for skinwalkers in New Mexico will be coming out. And I have my friend Dr. Dennis Carroll's writing the forward for that. And you should probably look him up. He's a really interesting guy. And he wrote the one for my Jewett City vampires. I wrote about vampires. I've wrote about vampires a couple different times, which is it's amazing. It's an amazing subject. I just love the paranormal, everything paranormal.
Oh, me too. We could probably do another show on that.
Yeah.
You know what? I have a book on vampires. I say invite DA back again.
I would love to do one on vampires.
We'll have to coordinate and do one because I think that would be fascinating.
Who doesn't love a good vampire?
That's right.
That'd be a good time, wouldn't it?
Arrange that we meet there and do a live in the French Quarter.
Oh, wouldn't that? I love how you think.
Well, I have one more question for each of you. If you were face to face with the goat man tonight, what would you want to ask him?
Are you happy? I think that will be the thing. I think Bigfoot, if you would talk to Bigfoot, I think he's pretty comfortable in his own skin. I think that he is quite happy foraging around in the woods, knocking on trees and howling. But the goat man seems to be a little bit more somber. He seems to be a little bit more sad than these other cryptids. And I think that I would want to know if he's happy or sad.
I like that. I think I'd ask him what he wants us to learn from him. I think he's a really intense character, very intense, and it would probably be the answer to be more uninhibited. I'd say to embrace that without going off the chain. We don't want to be too civilized, but we do have that behavior in us. We're supposed to embrace life. And I think that's what he is showing us. It's to balance that.
I love it. I love it.
Yep. So I figured
I'll meet you guys out by the bonfire here in about 10 minutes.
There we go. There we go.
Any closing thoughts from each of you?
I'm glad that we have this forum here. I would love to talk to anybody that doesn't share our opinions, because that's the way we all learn. And I'm looking forward to coming on back again.
Thank you so much for taking us through the journey into the Goatman territory tonight. It was absolutely fascinating. For those who want to take a deeper dive, check out D.A. Wysong's Monster Hunters of America series, including her book on the Goatman, Ronald Murphy Jr.'s extensive work on cryptids and folklore. I'm going to put all their links in the description. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video. Remember, history never truly dies. It just finds new ways to haunt us. Until next week, keep digging into the darkness.
Name